Okay, great. Well, it looks like we've got quite a few people have come in now from the waiting room. So great to see everyone here. Welcome. My name is Laura Schrake, and I am with the Council of the Great Lakes Region. And it is great to welcome you to our monthly webinar series, which we run as part of a larger business and sustainability network that is supported in part by the Herb Family Foundation. So it's wonderful to have you joining and with us today. The Council of the Great Lakes Region, or CGLR, is on a mission to solve for sustainability in the Great Lakes region. And our vision is for the Great Lakes region to be the first sustainable region in the world. And we know this is ambitious, but we also know that it is achievable through commitment and cross-sector collaboration, as well as innovation and investment. Solving for sustainability will require solutions that work for the region's people and communities, its environment, and its economy. And for the region to be truly sustainable, we must consider all these dimensions of sustainability: society, environment, economy. And the region's residents, including its many companies, carry a responsibility to help ensure the region's valuable resources and its biodiversity are protected, and that the region's future is a sustainable one. And that is why today we will be discussing how the private sector can contribute to the region's sustainability, particularly with respect to its biodiversity. We will hear firsthand about one company's commitment to biodiversity and how they approach environmental protection and preventing biodiversity loss, and how they make the business case to do so. We live in a remarkable region, one that holds over 1/5 of Earth's fresh surface water and supports over 3,500 species of plants, fish, and wildlife, including some that are globally rare. But due to climate change and human activity, the region's natural spaces and its biodiversity are at risk. A healthy Great Lakes ecosystem relies heavily on its natural habitat, which is intricately connected to the quality of life for its 107 million residents and the vitality of the region's $6 trillion economy. The Council of the Great Lakes region is engaging organizations who are committed to working together across borders and sectors to identify and implement sustainable solutions that support a healthy Great Lakes system. We are about to hear directly from one of those companies who has committed to corporate biodiversity stewardship, among other sustainability practices. And if any of you attending today are not yet engaged with the Council of the Great Lakes region, I encourage you to reach out to us and get involved. As we know, a sustainable Great Lakes region, it is within our reach, but only when everyone is at the table. So please do get in touch with us. But today, I'm so pleased to have with us Emily Johnston, a senior strategist with the Environment and Sustainability Department at Bruce Power, an electricity company in southwestern Ontario. Emily led the company's sustainability transition from qualitative to quantitative in 2020, and currently is responsible for Indigenous nation and community engagement related to the Bruce C project, which is a project that will use the impact assessment process to explore the feasibility of adding up to 4,800 megawatts of nuclear capacity at the Bruce site. We're so happy to have Emily with us today to share background on the company's biodiversity policy, which was just released earlier this year, and also to offer some examples and successes that have come from their actions to protect biodiversity. So from her presentation, we will get a glimpse of what a private sector commitment can look like, commitment to biodiversity, So really looking forward to her presentation. Following Emily, we will have time for Q&A. So should you have any questions, please type them in the Zoom Q&A box. I do want to note also that we have opened the Zoom chat for attendees to have the opportunity to engage with one another during the webinar if you would like. However, if your questions are directly for our speaker, please enter those in the Q&A box and not the chat. That just helps us monitor the questions as they come in for the Q&A session. So with that, I look forward to your engagement, and I'm very pleased to hand over to Emily Johnston.
All right, thanks, Laura. I'm just gonna do a sound check if you can hear me okay.
Yep, perfect.
Yep, okay, and I'm just gonna do my screen sharing here, okay. All right, and just a verification that everyone can see the slides.
Yep, that's great.
Okay, awesome. So thanks for the introduction. As mentioned, I'm Emily Johnston, Senior Strategist with Bruce Power, and today we're going to talk about biodiversity and business growth, and I'll walk through a look at the corporate value that we've found amongst other things in our sustainability program specifically related to the protection of biodiversity. So just before we get started, the Bruce Power site is located within the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation territory, the shared treaty and traditional territory of the Chippewas of Saugeen First Nation and Chippewas of Nawash Unceded First Nation, Nyeeshiming. Bruce Power is dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and is committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with the Indigenous communities we work with. We're committed to strong and respectful relationships with the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, also referred to as SON, the Métis Nation of Ontario Region 7, and the historic Saugeen Métis. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Bruce Power site, we're very fortunate to be situated on the beautiful shores of Lake Huron. We provide nuclear power to 1 in 3 homes, hospitals, schools, and businesses in Ontario, and medical isotopes across the globe to keep medical equipment sterilized and assist in fighting disease. As mentioned, our company is an electricity company, and we're based in Bruce County, Ontario. The site has approximately 4,200 full-time employees, and really we always say they are the foundation of our accomplishments, and we're so proud of the role that they play in safely delivering clean, reliable nuclear power to families and businesses across the province, as well as the life-saving medical isotopes around the world. We've worked really hard as a business over many, many years to build strong roots in Ontario and in our local communities, and are committed to protecting the environment and supporting the place that we live and work. So formed in 2001, Bruce Power is a Canadian-owned partnership of TC Energy, OMERS, the Power Workers Union, and the Society of United Professionals, and the majority of our employees actually have ownership in our business. So the picture you're seeing right now on the screen is actually one of our 2 generating stations. So the site itself has 2 generating stations, Bruce B, which is in the front of this picture, and Bruce A, which you can see in the distance. Each station has 4 nuclear reactors. The site as a whole also consists of various on-site ancillary infrastructure, including sewage processing plant and a water treatment plant, just to name a few. Our site is 930 hectares, and it really is home to a naturally diverse environment that contains a wide variety of plant and wildlife. The site itself sits in a really unique habitat. It sits in the Huron Fringe coastal environment and is on one of the world's largest sources of fresh water. So as a company, we recognize the direct and indirect impacts and dependence on our surrounding natural environment in our daily operations and in our supply chain. So we know that it's our responsibility as a business and as corporate citizens to act as stewards of the environment, and we take that responsibility to mitigate the impacts of our operations on biodiversity and to support initiatives to protect and enhance natural habitats and ecosystems with the utmost attention. So really at the end of the day, our business depends, heavily relies on ensuring that we protect the ecosystem that we operate within. So we have on site an environment and sustainability team, which I'm a part of. Our team supports the business cross-functionally on day-to-day ongoing operations, as well as long-term strategic planning and decision-making. And I'll share some of those details a little bit at the end. But right now, we're going to walk through one of the many biodiversity initiatives that make up our sustainability program here at Bruce Power. The initiative focuses on work we've done to restore a shoreline habitat, specifically a wetland habitat that's actually, I'll show in the next picture, close to the generating station Bruce A. And I like to share this example as it really talks about the journey that we went through. And I think it's important. Really, I just want to pause here and thank everyone for giving some time over typically lunch hour to learn about the journey. And I find this as I talk to my kids, but in this world where social media really shows us about a 10 to 30-second soundbite of outcome, and it typically focuses on sort of, as I call it, the end result curator perfection. I'm always talking to my 9-year-old about this, like, well, you're not seeing the journey, right? So don't get frustrated that you didn't have it right at the get-go, right? So really, I think like today we have a little bit of time to actually dive into the journey that we went through and not just focus on sort of those metrics at the end that do help, of course, build the business case and the ongoing support. But I'm just really looking forward to that. And again, thanks for everyone for joining. So I'm hoping that through this, we can provide you with some inspiration to take your next step. It doesn't have to be a big one, but next step in protecting biodiversity. And just to mention, this particular example I'm going to go through is in its 11th year. And again, it really demonstrates the strength in environmental partnerships and biodiversity benefit that can be realized through those. So it really is, from our standpoint, a win-win scenario. So as mentioned, this scenario involves Beta Dor, which is a provincially significant wetland just near our Bruce A generating station. So most people probably know, but wetlands provide significant benefit to ecosystems. They're super important. They prevent flood damage. They improve water quality. They give wildlife a home, and they provide valuable economic products like timber, as well as recreational opportunities like hunting, fishing, and nature appreciation. So in the province of Ontario, we actually have over 35 million hectares of wetland, but typically more in the north of our province. And where our site is situated in the south of the province, the wetlands are very much under heavy pressure and really need to have focus on protection. So the Beta Dor wetland itself is 107 acres in size. And it consists of marsh and peatlands and is known in the local ornithology or birding community as one of the better places to go winter birding. It has a really amazing bald eagle population. It's a potential spot to also see uncommon birds like the little gull, the canvasback, the barrows, goldeneye, American white pelicans, and harlequin ducks. And also provides a very rich aquatic habitat that of a variety of species that supports the broader Lake Huron as a whole. So unfortunately, in 2013, though, an invasive species, which some people may be familiar with, called Phragmites australis, common reed, started to pop up. And that's sort of where this journey begins. So this species, also commonly known as frag, is Canada's worst invasive plant. So you'll see in this picture the unique features that makes it such an aggressive and invasive species. It's a rhizome plant, so it just spreads out and can shoot up multiple areas across water. It grows very, very, very fast. And it happens to really like wetland habitat and shore and coastal shoreline areas. So as I mentioned, it's very, very quick growing, it's resilient, and it destroys habitat if left untreated, and really chokes out the native species in that space. So According to the Ontario Phragmites Working Group, invasive frag had spread to over 30% between 2010 and 2017 and has a presence in more than 5,000 hectares within Ontario, which really, when you break that down, it's approximately 5 football fields. So really, I've talked about the horizontal growth, the fact that it can grow really quick. It can also reach really dense levels and very high in nature. So it can grow up to 15 feet. So it also has this ability to release natural phytotoxins into the soil. They inhibit, and in addition to all the other things it does, it has the potential to kill surrounding plants in the area and allow more invasive frag to just continue to thrive in the area. And really, it is devastating to the entire ecosystem as a whole. So just in this picture, as I already mentioned, you'll see sort of what the plant looks like, as well as the structure of the root system. So really, our journey began back in 2013. And I personally was the one who received an email from a community citizen living along the shoreline and inviting us to meet with the municipality of Kincardine to talk about Phragmites. The citizen was very concerned that there was this very dense grass growing right by their property, and it seemed to just be getting worse and worse as time went on. So we took this opportunity to meet with the municipality, and that's really where things started to kick off. So we learned that the municipality was going to develop a Phragmites management plan. And with the help of a local organization called the Lake Huron Coastal Center, um, they asked Bruce Power to consider participating as well. So our first step was to provide information on the presence of Phragmites on our site. So that was the first ask of this beginning of this partnership. And really, for this plan to be successful, Bruce Power had to participate, because if you have pockets of people not participating in a shoreline program that's tackling an invasive species, then that means the effort is likely not to be as successful. So really, the request had come in the fall of 2013 to us, and by early 2014 we had things in place to start doing the surveys in conjunction with the expertise of the Lake Huron Coastal Center, which is a group that we actually had already routinely worked with on a variety of other shoreline initiatives. So that group helped us survey our site and confirm the presence of Phragmites. At this time, we started to develop a Phragmites management plan to guide efforts and encompass lands under the auspice of Bruce Power, as well as those owned by OPG, Hydro One, NWMO, and other private entities. So the Bruce Power plan was, and still is, meant to complement the invasive Phragmites management plan that was initially developed for the municipality of Kincardine. And the plan itself actually covers the Bay d'Or area, but it also covers shoreline all within the municipality's range. And beyond that, beyond just what we're talking about today, there's actually a much broader shoreline plan that goes all the way up basically to the Bruce Peninsula. So it's meant to guide effective, efficient, and environmentally responsible control of Phragmites. And it is based on recent and accurate information and available data of that time. So in 2014 and even till today, we continue to work and fund various items related to the eradication of Phragmites. So from 2014 onward, Bruce Power has provided funding for various groups to obtain necessary material for removing Phragmites, including such things as handheld cutters, as well as the amphibious truck saw that you'll see. You'll see that picture of this vehicle. It's actually pretty cool. It just skims across the ground. It cuts the frag at a time of year that is necessary, and then we collect it, and the groups carrying out this effort then take it off and dispose of it in the appropriate manner. And as I mentioned, many other businesses and community groups continue to participate in this effort, such as Ontario Power Generation, Kincardine Residents Against Phragmites, and the Invasive Phragmites Control Center. In addition to funding like monetary funding. Members of our environment and sustainability team also provide technical advice to this effort, and members of our corporate affairs creative strategy team have offered in-kind support over time as well, with creating material for educational purposes. As well as our technical team also supports in data collection of aquatic species. So in 2021, we publicly released our efforts. So many years after we had started this initiative, into our sustainability report. And so really, when you can see initially when we did those surveys, we did them of site, but we also did them of the Betador area. So what you'll see in the 2014 picture is the varying dense levels of frag. And you'll see that frag in this wetland had been established in over 60% of the area. And then in 2020, Phragmites was only remaining in about 26 hectares. So significant reduction. And even really, as this has gone on, and then most recently, the current state in 2021, 2022, there's only 4 hectares of sparsely dense Phragmites remaining in this wetland. And so what we do now is we monitor on an annual basis, and we treat as necessary. So really, like, the stands are quite thin, and as they start to pop up or get to a point where they need attention, then that attention is given, because there's other areas of the shoreline that continue to need more of this attention you're seeing and these results here. So as I mentioned, we released publicly sort of the success of this, along with many other quantitative metrics in 2021. So in 2020, Bruce Power took a major leap in how we share our success in sustainability within our company as a whole and externally. So we evolved our narrative from a qualitative narrative to a very quantitative narrative. And at this point, it was a very natural transition. We had been doing many of these initiatives, like the one I just spoke about, for many, many years, and just happy to be on the ground, getting things done, working with communities, working on initiatives that were important to them, all beyond our regulatory framework. Like, our regulatory guidance doesn't tell us we have to do any of this. These just are things that are important to us as a business, as a member of the community that we operate in. So really, it did feel like a natural transition time, though, because there was opportunity at this point coming up in sort of the green financing network, or in green financing space, that we would be able to potentially access if we were to put some of this effort into more of a quantitative narrative, or share the quantitative narrative that we had in-house already. So in our initial report, we openly committed to clear, relevant disclosure with actions that drive real, tangible benefits in the near term, in lieu of idealistic commitments 2 to 3 decades away. So really, we wanted to focus on what people could do now. It's wonderful. Many businesses and set very lofty goals, but they seem to be out in the future. And we really wanted to focus on, yes, having the eye on the future, but also having an opportunity to share what we're doing right now. And so this is where we first disclosed our commitment to continuing to support the protection of Betador and share the progress we had made that I spoke of already. In June of this year, you'll see here on the slide is our most recent report. So we're 4 years into this process of quantitative disclosure. And I just want to encourage everyone to have a look at it. And it's available openly on our website, and you can read through just our methodology of how we quantify things, and where we're going with a variety of things. And as I had already mentioned, that up until 2023, and we still have ongoing effort, you'll see within the report our success again disclosed of just the few small stands that remain. So Bruce Power and the Invasive Phragmites Control Center will continue to collaboratively work together on this initiative as well as others. And again, just encouraging everyone to have a look at that. And as Laura had mentioned, we further solidified our commitment to broader biodiversity protection this year with the release of our biodiversity policy. And so this policy is really an extension of our existing environment and sustainability policy. And many of these commitments have been really core to our business since 2001. And again, it just sort of it seemed like a natural time for us to really put into a commitment what we've been doing for many, many years, and formalize that we will continue to do this. And we wanted to disclose it publicly to just share and be open with that, but also to encourage other businesses to do the same. And again, you can read more about our policy. I won't go through every point today, but you can read more about our policy on our website. Another important part of our sustainability program is through our third-party reviews and accreditations. So in 2023, Bruce Power was recognized as an ESG industry top rated and ESG regional top rated. We were ranked in the top 3 within our sub-industry on a global scale and on the top 3% in the utilities industry. And part of this rating also has an area that focuses on biodiversity. So that's also been a very useful tool for us to continue to build out our biodiversity program and also talk to various people across the business of how important biodiversity is and sort of where it all plays into the overall programmatic strategy. And another item to note with respect to the Betador work was in November of 2022, Bruce Power received a wildlife habitat certification of silver for our efforts of conservation as it relates to Phragmites. So we are working on renewal of that. Again, another way that we've committed to just ongoing work and protection of biodiversity, specifically to Betador. But there's many other things that, again, we make up our biodiversity program. But as mentioned, our strong sustainability program that is made up of these efforts, such as this wetland protection, all contributed to the company's ability to enter into the green financing market. So just there we go. So really, since becoming, sorry, I just need to take a drink. Thank you. So as I had mentioned earlier, one of the catalysts that helped to sort of move our narrative from qualitative to quantitative was the interest in accessing the green financing space. And in 2021, Bruce Power was actually able to become the first nuclear operator in the world to successfully issue green bonds. And to date, we've actually been able to cumulatively issue 1.7 billion in green bonds through 3 different offerings. Again, a lot of this information can be found on our corporate website, but the latest offerings come following the Government of Canada's recent successful federal government green bond that included nuclear as a use of proceeds under Canada's updated green bond framework, and Ontario also including nuclear in its framework. Canada's updated green bond framework identified new eligible nuclear expenditures for allocation to a green bond, including investments in new reactors, refurbishment of existing facilities, research and development, and some investments in Canada's nuclear supply chain. So we use these proceeds in this space of green bond offering to allocate to our ongoing Unit 6 major component replacement project, the Unit 3 major component replacement project, and the Project 2030. All eligible investments described in our Bruce Power Green Financing Framework. These projects themselves focus on extending the life and increasing efficiency of nuclear generation facility to enable Bruce Power to provide clean, reliable power for decades to come. while displacing millions of tons of emissions from carbon-emitting electricity generators. So as I mentioned, green bond was sort of one of the options that we were looking to um, enter into from a financial aspect of our business. There's other things too that we've been able to leverage as well, including sustainability linked loans for some of our other environmental metrics um, in that make up our sustainability program. But it's quite a bit of information, and I'm really eager to answer questions. I can't see anyone's questions if they've come in, so I may stop now and just sort of open it up or send it back to Laura, if that's okay.
Yep, that's great. Emily, thank you so much. That was a really nice, background of Bruce Power's commitment to biodiversity. And it was definitely nice to understand the background and also the impact you're having and the progress that you're making with the Phragmites. So thank you for that overview. We have had some questions come
Okay.
in live, and we've also had some questions come in with the registration. So I'm going to
Sure.
start with a couple of those, and then we'll just sort of jump back and forth a little bit. Excuse me. So I want to start first with one of the questions that came in with registration, and was talking about how or asking about how companies and conservation policies can coexist. And it also, I guess, sort of connects with another question that came in about how you make a business case for biodiversity stewardship and also for creating a biodiversity policy. So would you be able to sort of touch on those?
Yeah, I think so. There's many, many parts to that. So if I don't answer all of them, you can always circle me back. But you sort of see from our journey, like our policy came much later. Um, but really, I think foundationally, it was just like sort of proving the worth of these community initiatives and what they could actually do. So really being able to, like, we had a big emphasis on the ground work. Not that there is anything wrong with funding plans or whatnot. And as you'll see through the Phragmites example, we did put funding towards management plans and material as well as like on the ground in the field efforts. But I do think success came from being able to show and demonstrate the actual success, like visually, right? So when you're able to tell someone through pictures, through actual numbers, it definitely helps, especially as you talk to different people across your organization, right? And you're able to meet them where they're at, depending on sort of where their space is in the business, and show all the different benefit. And as I said, as I walked people through, and we may have gone through some of those slides pretty quick, so I'm happy to circle back to some of that as well. But when you're able to show and demonstrate the line of all the way out to the green financing option, it's sort of like a win-win case scenario of it's basically hard to deny not continuing to invest in such efforts as what we did with Beta Door.
And how deep has biodiversity made it into the core business at Bruce Power? Is it something that, especially with the policy now formalizing things, every effort is considering biodiversity and the impacts that it could have?
Yeah, I would say very much so. We're like, fortunately, I often say this to people as a nuclear business, we are fortunate that we are heavily regulated, right? Like we have regulators that drive us, that create this very strong foundational level for us that we have to uphold as a business. It's like imperative to the operation of our company. Um, and with that, then since we have this strong foundation, which includes a lot of biodiversity, we're able to then go, well, what can we do beyond that, right? Like that's great. The regulatory aspect is fine. We're satisfying that. But what is important? What are important community issues? What are important things to sort of the longevity of our business that the regulator may not be requiring us to conform to at this time? And so that's where you get those creative aspects of the business of and especially in the biodiversity space, like it's important that we recognize the success of our business, and the success of our business is with the health of a healthy ecosystem, right? So I would say right from maybe things were a little bit like obviously we have an environment and sustainability policy. We've had that for a very long time. We have very strong management systems. So I think it was just more an evolution of sort of teasing that part out more and bringing more attention to it. Like this is another focus area that we're doing. We've been doing it for a long time, but I think it was an important evolution to be able to say, biodiversity is really core business component, and it consists of all of these things. So really, I would say it's pretty much rooted into our whole business at this point. Um, right from like the ongoing operations to, as I said, long-term strategic planning.
That's great. And Sam has typed in a question asking, where do biodiversity and carbon strategy overlap?
Hmm.
Be able to.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. Like I think it's components of our overall sustainability strategy, right? And obviously there is a lot of not, I won't call it chatter. It's like ongoing, much better discussion than I've seen over many years as I've worked in this space of sort of that connection between um, carbon and nature, right? And the protection of biodiversity and your carbon strategy. And so we're actually doing quite interesting work too with an organization called Alice in protecting. I guess I could have talked about this as well today, but we're working with them to regenerate marginalized farmland that doesn't really have an economic, necessarily like a strong economic value, but it has a significant value in the carbon market. And so we're working with them as well on the ground to to do that and create like carbon sequestration potential and whatnot. And again, I maybe stop there, but everyone can access information on our success we've had with Alice as well. But yeah, we're definitely recognizing the benefit of biodiversity, and there is significant benefit of protection of land, biodiversity as a whole, and the carbon strategy that a business makes. So we recognize the coexistence of the two and the necessity. They're not really separate in our minds, like they're very much interconnected and things that we look at together. So.
Yeah, that's great. And this topic is very timely because we actually have Alice, the CEO of Alice, will be our guest for next month's
Oh, wonderful. Yeah,
webinar.
no, that's great.
And he'll be talking about like biological carbon
Yes.
sequestration, the connection between biodiversity and carbon. So that's a plug. I'm going to say it in my closing.
Yeah.
That's a plug for everybody to tune
Yeah.
in to next month's webinar.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so yeah,
Yeah, no, there's definitely, if you're following in this space a lot, like there is that sort of next evolution in that carbon space, which is like, what is the biodiversity offset, I guess, is how people really talk about it. Like, what is the value? Like, there is value, obviously, in the protection of um, biodiversity from a carbon level as well as like other aspects too. So
yeah,
the
that's great.
strategy, as I said, the strategy in itself, you can't really have one without the other. So yep.
Yeah, yeah, and good to know that you're working with Allison.
Mhm.
Those external partnerships are so important.
They are very much so, yeah.
I want to jump to a couple of questions that have come in live, and they're with respect to your Phragmites efforts.
Mhm.
One has come in from Jonathan, and he's asking, what does like dispose in the appropriate manner
Mm.
mean? Um,
Yep.
like if the waste is composted or recycled. And he also asked, has there been any effort to use Phragmites as a feedstock or a product?
Oh yeah. You know what's interesting? The feedstock product. So during my undergrad degree, we're gonna hopefully I'll answer your question. I might go off on a bit of a tangent here, but I went to school in Windsor, Ontario, which is a very southern part of the province, and Phragmites was actually seen there first in one of the first areas. And I remember going out there with one of my professors as a field visit, and he's standing beside these tall stands and said, if anyone can figure out what to do with this from like a pyrolysis standpoint, say for example, you'll be very wealthy. And it's interesting then as my career went on, and then I was working in this frag project, and I just thought, oh, isn't that interesting? I wish I had figured it out. But there are people who are looking at it through sort of different, like from a disposal standpoint, like how do you create value out of this material? Typically, like from a proper disposal standpoint, it has to be harvested and cut in a certain manner, a certain time of year. They try and avoid cutting it after it's like in a seed state, because that would just create obviously more spread of the plant itself. And so yeah, it's like it's a composting method, but it's a very like how you dispose of invasive species, right? These certain areas, it has to have a process. So I would leave that one like in the more detail, like I gave you pretty high level. Like there is the Invasive Phragmites Control Center usually is a good resource to kind of talk in more detail of how that is all done. But yeah, there are certain things that they have to watch for and certain times of year that are more important when they are doing their efforts to remove the plant. So
Mhm. Yeah,
yeah.
that's an interesting question, and a great point of
Hmm.
timing of the process and removal so that it
Yes,
doesn't create more
absolutely.
spread.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay, and so now I'm going to jump back. I'm jumping back and forth,
Oh,
but
that's fine.
some questions that came in with the registration, and this is one wanting to understand if you have any recommendations on for like smaller private business that maybe has minimal resources, but they still want to have an impact. And this kind of is similar to a second question that came in, asking about early stage, like climate tech startups wanting to think about biodiversity. So like the small businesses, but also the startups wanting
Yeah.
to have an impact.
Okay, so I think to me they're two separate, pretty
Okay.
kind of separate questions. If I were to think of sort of what could, like, everyone can do something, right? Like I live in a very rural part of the province, and I think it's amazing. Like you see, even just like our local business community, they're not multi-million dollar companies, but they're able to do so much with not necessarily a large amount of monetary investment. And I think I had talked about in the presentation um, how yes, of course we've given monetary investment to help purchase large scale equipment and cutters, but we've also given in-kind support, and I think that that's um, where some of these efforts can really take off. Like an organization could, and I think there's value in that as well, like allowing your people, human capital, to delve into things that are maybe even in their area of skill set that they've brought to the business that might not actually be fully leveraged at this time. And I think like if you allow people to give in kind work, it actually probably ups their productivity because they're able to participate in something that might be in they're passionate about. So I think it's not just saying like, oh, we don't have a ton of monetary ability, but maybe you have other things. Maybe you have other skill sets that you're able to offer. As I had mentioned, like our creative strategy team, they offered in kind to develop educational material, and all these little things they add up. And I think like if you start small and you're able to prove like the benefit of the partnership, then slowly that funding could come, right? Maybe it won't be monumental. Like our really in 2015, our fund it was about I think about $400,000. But we have hundreds of requests that come in every year. So it's not as though we were allotting like hundreds of thousands of dollars to like one particular organization. We had to spread this wide over many counties and many different organizations. So um, yeah, it's been obviously the amount over the many years has amounted to a lot, but I think you can do a ton. I work with tons of organizations that can do very um, extensive work with very little. I think environmental people have become out of necessity very creative in carrying out what they want to do um, with a multitude of varying budgets, right? And there's also opportunity as well um, to leverage different, at least with like obviously in Ontario, there's different funds that you can leverage as a corporation if you work with communities to or community groups. There's often many different avenues to um, obtain money, and sometimes just even being a partner with an organization is helpful in itself. So I think it's really understanding what initiatives you're trying to do, what the community groups are trying to achieve, what you want to achieve as a business based on your core value, what's material to you, and going from there. And I think that was sort of one of the points I was trying to get across is um, we can share about our Phragmites. Oh, we won this award in 2022. Um, we have all these wonderful accolades, but really, like, if people only look at that, they didn't see that we started this effort 11 years ago, right? And it wasn't as though we didn't really truly share our quantification of metrics and success until 2020, right? So it was like 7 years before we even talked about that. So I think it's just taking that first step is really key.
Yeah, great advice.
And then now the tech question, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm actually looking at it a little bit closer. So I'm glad that you pointed out to separate them because the tech question, it is about early stage startups,
hmm
but they're asking more about how to think about frameworks and benchmarks around biodiversity.
Yeah, and that's a good one because that one is really helpful, right? Like that's helpful in building business cases. So I get a lot of a lot of emails on people wanting to chat about softwares and different sort of avenues of tech. And I think that's really fabulous that people are looking at that space and like you know, how can automation of data basically help like help tell a story, help build a business case, help from that aspect. And I think one of my biggest things that I would recommend is like and it's similar to all sustainability space, like it's still a very much data management effort, right? Like every business has massive data sets that have never, many of them haven't been like put into like electronic space from a certain point in their business. Obviously, there'll be that technology transition that sort of longer term businesses have had to go through, but there is like still that data um, effort that needs to happen. And I would say from my perspective, what's helpful is if you're creating a resource that doesn't necessarily need like significant sustaining capital to continue to use, right? So if you're a data offering business and you're able to offer solutions very much like ground level, sort of like when showed like those metrics of like how you're able to put your metrics into very visual graphics. I think that's very helpful to corporations, so they're able to share that. Um, and just, I think something that's able to be like, it's not like a massive investment because as we've already heard, it's hard already to have investment sometimes in some businesses for just on the ground effort, right? So it's like looking at like smart solutions, but that are um, financially feasible, I guess, for varying degrees of business, right? So it's like, I think it's better to have multiple businesses able to access your software solution as opposed to just like one or two that are offering it because it's of like the financial barrier to access is there, right? So I think it's like finding that balance of where you can go from that. So
Mhm. That's great. Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, thanks for separating out those answers. Um, so can you touch on like supply chain, value chain, and how you're engaging them to have broader impact on your projects?
Yeah, for sure. So supply chain definitely is very important into our sustainability strategy. And you'll see, especially when it comes to when we talk about more like emissions standpoint, like obviously with scope 3, that's like an important portion of the supply chain. But very much as I had already talked about, the integrative nature of our program, right within our supply chain sort of question answer when we're looking to work with various vendors or organizations, we have an environment and sustainability section to that's built off of core values from our program. And so I'd say that's like sort of on the like working level of like sort of where we start our analysis of who we're going to work with, and we start asking questions of, you know, what are your emissions, what are your values, what is your policy, what, and so that's very much rooted in that whole supply chain process, and also a good collaboration between our environment and sustainability team and the supply chain team as well. So
Great. I think we have time for a couple more
okay,
questions.
sure, yeah.
So I'm going to go. We've got a couple that have come in live, so I'll end with those. Robert is asking if Bruce Power has worked with other energy companies to advance biodiversity and other ESG issues in the sector.
So okay, so can you write?
So
I'm
if
just trying to think
you,
of,
yeah, working
yeah,
with any other energy companies on, I guess, shared efforts around biodiversity or
yeah,
ESG issues
yeah.
in the
So,
broader sector.
oh, okay. So I guess like from a biodiversity standpoint, like as I had mentioned, Beta Door, we've worked with our energy counterparts, Ontario Power Generation. Of course, they've been very a good partner in that space. We've done and shared information on Beta Door. So that comes to mind when I think about Phragmites. And then can you just ask me about the second question? Sorry.
And also around other ESG issues.
And other ESG issues. Yeah, and as I had mentioned, like well, Alice, we've worked with Alice, like not necessarily like in the energy space, but they're definitely a different partner that we've worked with in the past. And oh, there's so many. It's like it's hard to say. We work with, you know, many different organizations every single year, depending on sort of what is important to the community. And I think like I would really like the sustainability report really helps sort of explain that. I don't want to leave people out. We work with conservation authorities all the time that make up the watershed that we are in or surround us. We also work with various organizations that are located a little bit further from our company, like in the Greater Toronto area. So I'm just thinking of like we partner with Plug and Drive. We've partnered with on various sort of electric vehicle initiatives. Really testing my knowledge right now at this point, but
So
that's wonderful.
if we dive into that sustainability report, we
Absolutely,
definitely will
yeah, and I
talk
think
about
even over the years, it talks about all the different groups that we work with. I just don't want to really leave anyone out. You know, I mentioned the Lake Huron Coastal Center. They're a group we've worked with for over a decade, I would say, on doing various beyond regulatory. So in the sustainability space initiatives, we work with tons of tree planting organizations. Thinking of like Saw Green is a more local one, all the way up to Ontario Nature Conservancy of Canada. Um, the- yeah, there's just so many of them. Yeah, but yeah, we definitely do. And if you do have time to have a look at our sustainability report, I really would encourage you to do that. So.
That's great. Thank you. And the last one I want to finish on is around metrics and measures of success, because I know that quantifying progress in biodiversity can be challenging to measure. And so I wanted to ask you about that. And I'm glad that somebody, Emma, has also asked a question around that, wanting to know if you're working together with other parties or communities on these efforts to share the same biodiversity metrics, or if you've developed your own metrics. Maybe if you can just touch on a little bit of like, how do you measure success and what metrics you're using?
I know, and we have a hard stop at 1, and I've only got 4 minutes left. So I could go on about the metrics in the sustainability space for a really long time, because it's one of the things that even when I first built our corporate program was it's like a hot topic, right? Because it is subject, and there finally now we've seen through like the standardization of the ISSB standards that just recently came out. We are getting more standardization. Luckily for us, we guided the company we have a pretty strong ESG team here, and we guided the company into creating metrics sort of based on a bunch of different frameworks. We weren't directed to conform to a specific framework. So what we did was we understand what was material to our business, and we looked for standards that may have that metric, and offer guidance for it. So, and then part of our validation of that logic is through those accredited ratings that we go through every year, right? So we know we're on the right path. But yeah, the standardization is still something that's evolving. We're pleased to see the scope 1, scope 2 adoption of sort of standardized metrics. Biodiversity isn't quite there yet. You'll see like Task Force of Nature Financial Disclosure. It's just sort of still in that comment kind of period, but the success that we saw through the disclosure of like climate, I think is encouraging that biodiversity will get there. I think it has a few more barriers than emission accounting. Emission accounting's been around for a long time, right? Like it's there's a strong foundation there from even like a regulatory space. So I think I am hopeful that the biodiversity metrics will get there. It will be interesting to see how that all evolves. So right now, what we've done is just look for standard guidance across a variety of standards, of how we disclose biodiversity. We also don't like that's important to us too, is to be transparent and open of how we're disclosing things. Right from the get-go, we have a whole methodology section in our sustainability report, and it goes through detail. And as we've had to evolve it, we very much tell people like this is how we've evolved our quantification, because it's one of those spaces that when things become more refined, then you have to go back and say, okay, where do we evolve the way we're looking at things, right? So I think it's it's sort of an interesting culture shift, right? Too, of knowing that you're quantifying things in a space that's continuing to evolve, which I think for some corporations that is a bit scary, right? Like, because many want to give just the exact information. But I think there is this understanding across the space that you've started somewhere, you've explained how you've done it, and as more information becomes available, you know, the methodologies of different quantifications become more refined, then you evolve too. And so yeah, like from a biodiversity standpoint, as I said, we've looked at different standards, kind of done different reviews of what other people are quantifying and what other people are doing. So yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully that answers that.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that's, I think, kind of a nice way to end the webinar with like the journey, and that it's still an
Yeah.
evolution.
Yes, absolutely.
But it's thank you so much for your time today, Emily. And it really is great to know what Bruce Power is doing to support biodiversity in the region, what other companies can do, and that role of the private sector in doing their part in preventing biodiversity loss. So thank you so much for sharing Bruce Power's story with us. And thank you to everyone that has joined us today. A recording of the webinar will be available next week and sent via email. So please keep an eye out for it in your inbox. And immediately following this webinar, you will receive an email from us with a survey. So we would highly appreciate your feedback on this webinar, and any input on what other topics you would like to see addressed with future webinars. So if you could please take a few minutes and fill out the survey, that would be really appreciated. And as we mentioned earlier, next month's webinar, it's on September 19th, and we'll be expanding the conversation around biodiversity, and we'll explore nature-based solutions and the benefits of biological carbon sequestration. So hopefully everybody can join us then. The registration is now open on CGLR's website on the event page. And I think that's it. So thank you again, Emily. And thanks everyone, and have a great rest of your day.